Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Bronson's Soapbox, where I tend to talk about video games. This week, I'm sure you've heard, it is PlayStation's 20th anniversary. And what this means, other than wanting to buy one of those ridiculously sick PS4 headsets or controllers with the PlayStation 1 gray and button layout and combo, look to them, it means you've probably been reminiscing about your favorite PlayStation memories and things to do with the original PlayStation. I want to talk about how the original PlayStation and the PlayStation line of home consoles and, to a lesser extent, portables have changed the game for the game industry and the positive influence and sometimes negative influence the PlayStation has had on the world of video games. So first we need a little bit of a brief history lesson. The original PlayStation came out in September of 1995 in the States, December 94 in Japan, and it was a wildly popular system right from the start. But there would have never been a PlayStation if it weren't for Nintendo. For those of you who don't know the story, I'll try and explain. For those of you who do, I'll keep it brief. Back in the early 90s, CD technology was this big new thing, and Sega had the Sega CD with games like Night Trap, and Sonic CD was good, at least. They got one good thing out of it, but anyway. It was a new big thing, and Nintendo wanted a CD add-on for their console. So they contracted the fine folks who made the Super Nintendo sound chip, Sony, to work on an add-on. The deals were set up, Sony started making them, started doing the R&D, but Nintendo didn't fit like the way the deal was set up. It gave Sony way too much control over games were made and rights to games on CDs, and the ability to manufacture their own PlayStation console with Super Nintendo with a disc tray already built in. So they're telling Sony everything's cool, everything's great, but then they go over to Philips and say, hey, we want a more favorable deal with you. CES happens, Sony announces it, and then Nintendo proceeds to go, we have no idea what they're talking about, we're announced we're working with Philips. Sony at this point has two options, scrap the whole project and let it go, but thankfully, for the game industry as a whole, their president of Sony at the time listened to Ken Kutaragi, who said, no, we can save this, we can turn it into a system, and was super pissed and said, yeah, we're going to beat Nintendo, we're going to be the next big game system. And what ended up happening is they learned why other companies failed, Neo Geo, 3DO, etc. They learned from Neo Geo and 3DO that you can't launch at a price point over $300, in a lot of cases $200. It's just the market won't have it. What they also learned was that, okay, we don't have games, we don't have a history in games. We need to go out and pay for other people to make games for us. We need to make the tools to develop for on our console easier than anyone else, and push that this is a developer's machine. Developers first, developers making great games. And that's exactly what they did. And they signed Psygnosis, the guys who did Wipeout. They signed the Lemmings guys. They talked Universal into contracts for making two games for them that would end up being Spyro and Crash, that would get several sequels, and the studios that made those games would eventually be bought by Sony during the PS2 era. They just went around and they went up to Square and said, look, Nintendo's doing cartridges, we're doing CDs, bring Final Fantasy to us. You know, they did the same thing with Konami and Castlevania and all these games that were associated with the Nintendo and associated with Sega suddenly were only available on PlayStation, or best on PlayStation in some cases, like Resident Evil 2. And they were the one who started the whole, hey, look, we'll sell the console for more. So this is both good and bad, is they were the first ones, or one of the first ones, to do the say, hey, we'll sell the console at a loss and make it up through game sales. So more tech can be put on a console, but it also means losses occur, and if you don't do well with software, then you're kind of screwed. But PlayStation 1 ended up being a huge success. They ended up selling over 100 million units and blew the Nintendo 64 and Sega Saturn out of the water. And then they started to hype their next system, the PS2, and the PS2 kind of came, it was this perfect storm for Sony in the sense that they had their competitors weren't doing well. Sega was dead with the Dreamcast, essentially. The PlayStation 1 was unbelievably popular. And then Nintendo was kind of off, continuing to do weird shit instead of just worrying about, great games getting third parties on board, and Microsoft was a newcomer. So the general public really only cared about PlayStation as far as console gaming went. Their new system looked incredibly powerful, and it was the only system that had DVD playback built in. You didn't need to buy an add-on like the Xbox, and the GameCube and Dreamcast didn't have it. So you have this perfect storm of people are only focused on your brand, all your competitors are inept, and you have all the third parties making games either primarily for you and coding around you first, or being exclusive to you. And that's why the PS2 ended up with one of the most amazing libraries of all time in the history of video games, that with all these games, which at the time were exclusives, like you had Dragon Quest, Kingdom Hearts, Devil May Cry, Metal Gear, Gran Turismo, the Dragon Ball games, Shadow of the Colossus, Ico, just the list goes on and on and on and on and on, why the PS2 is a great system. And it came out with a DVD player back in a time where DVD players were really expensive. A good DVD player was the cost of a PS2 by itself. So putting the system out at that price was, quite frankly, brilliant. Like, hey, you'll get this awesome DVD player that happens to play all these games, plus it plays your PS1 games, so your library carries over. And the PS2 was a massive success, and I love the fact that it was the system that really started the whole media frenzy for games. Like, hey, this isn't just a games box, it also does movies, it also does music, etc., etc., etc. PS3 came out, and that was kind of a rough patch for them. They got too cocky. They launched the console at a way too high of a price point. They put way too much hardware in the box. They didn't worry about developers and just said, fuck it, we're going to do this weird architecture and you're going to deal with it because PlayStation, bitches. And in general, they just messed up the whole way they did the system. They did rebound by producing great games, cutting costs, cutting out shit in the hardware that they really didn't need. And PS3 ended up being, in my opinion, the better console from that generation, but it took a while. It took a while to get there. They had free online, but they scrapped out PS4 because they realized we can't maintain reliable quality servers and all these things you want if we're going to do this for free. And then, as far as their portable lineup goes and their more recent stuff, PSP didn't revolutionize much, but in my opinion, it was a better handheld than the DS. Games looked better, games played better, it was a more comfortable system to hold, and in my opinion, it had better games. I'm sorry, the DS lineup is incredibly overrated. Vita, if you don't like indie games and you don't like Japanese games, it's a failure for you. Just stating a fact. And PS4 is on pace to be the best-selling system of all time, largely because they did the consumer right in the lead up to the system, and it has a really good interface. It's quick, it's clean, it's snappy. It is smart and links up to other things like Facebook really well. It has the private chat that everyone likes. It has the best looking console version of our multiplats. So it doesn't beat the PC, but it has the best looking multiplats. And they're not out now, but the future is very bright for exclusives for PlayStation. The PlayStation line of consoles have been great. Like, over the past 20 years, of PlayStation, I have countless memories of just amazing games. Me and my friends, like, playing Budokai 3 far into the night, 100%ing Crash Bandicoot 2, crying at the end of Metal Gear 3, my 7 playthroughs of Metal Gear 4 and how unbelievably incredible that game was at the time, or Uncharted 2, that train sequence that's still super impressive. And I hope the PlayStation line continues, because they always seem to have something for everyone and try and do right by their consumers, and they haven't always done the best, but they've always made a compelling product that makes it so the game industry is more competitive. So happy 20th birthday, PlayStation. I hope you have 20 more. Anyway, next week I'll probably be talking about Mario or Warcraft. I don't know, I have a lot of ideas for this show. What do you guys want to talk about? Anyway, you can follow us on Facebook, TheGamerAccess.com, Twitter, @TheGamerAccess, and Twitch.tv/TheGamerAccess. We now have a donation page on our Twitch. Please donate. It helps get us quality microphones, quality capture cards, and helps us travel to things like E3 so we can produce awesome content for you. Like, comment, etc. I'll see you next week.